This is a book for nerds.
I hope people actually listen to this part.
Let me let that marinate.
How the F do buildings learn?
Spoiler alert. But it made me feel something.
This would be a perfect coffee table book.
Which is actually a really interesting segue into this book.
How Buildings Learn, Stewart Brand. Fantastic book.
Spoiler alert.
The rating of the book will come at the end of this segment. When I first heard about this book, I was like, how the F do buildings learn? In short, this book brings in the time and human dimensions through these new vectors I haven't really thought about in a while.
It makes 3D 4D.
Exactly. In terms of actual physical structure, they talk about building horizontally versus vertically. Those affect how human beings within the building can communicate. If you're on different floors, then say goodbye to communication. You're not going to walk up the stairs. Are you building for humane complexity, or are you trying to be pure and simple? This is the big one that I want to spend time discussing with you. The synchronic, where you're trying to fit everything together at one point in time, or diachronic, how you fit everything over time. Because I'm always trying to make everything fit all at once. You can't do that all the time.
They made a movie about that. It's called Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oddly autobiographical for me, so. That
is an interesting starting point. I really think that this is a book for nerds. One design decision about a house turns into the nth consequence 5, 10, 30 years down the line. I don't think most people thought like this in the 90s when it came out. Certainly nobody thinks like this today because a new thing comes out every 5 seconds on a slow day. You need a certain mindset going into it of we are going to approach the long way around. That doesn't mean it's super slow, although I think it gets repetitive in some spots. The underlying logic of the book is that we're going to take a thing and we're going to keep looking at this thing and we're going to keep looking at it from different angles, and then eventually we might pull some principles from it, but that's not the point. The point is to go through the practice of looking how a decision or a set of decisions plays out over a century, which is fascinating because it's not really how I think about most things. And it's also why it's really popular with a cluster of software engineers. Code bases and buildings have a lot in common.
You inherit what you got.
Was there any vignette you found most interesting?
I really liked the parts about presidents' homes.
I'm so glad you said that.
I always wanted to visit those homes to see what's about. I've read the Hamilton biography by Ron Chernow.
I also got to read a Chernow book on here.
We do. There's there's a lot of San Francisco structures too.
Surprise.
Stewart Brand lives Napa Sonoma Valley, one of those places. I'm Cliff House. I've walked by it so many times, but I had no idea it used to be a giant castle, because now it's a very plain looking building.
Did it burn down?
Yeah, it burned down.
Woof.
But what about you? What is a historical building you've always wanted to visit?
Wait, what am I answering? The historical building or the vignette?
Which one do you prefer to answer?
Both. Because I like talking. Actually, what have I always wanted to visit? I visited a lot of places that I wanted to. Been a castle fan since I had those inside of a castle book. You know what I'm talking about?
The cutaway kind.
Yeah, the cutaway. I love castles since then. I really love old libraries. Surprise, surprise. Let me let that marinate, but I'll answer the book part. Really like the presidential houses because it's comparing Washington's house with Jefferson's house, Monticello, which I have visited. Reflecting back on it now, it's octagonal, which means you can't really do anything with that. Walking through the house as a 13-year-old boy, I was like, oh, this is sick. Now as an adult, I'm like, where would you put anything?
Sofa.
Yeah. I really kind of selfishly liked how much he absolutely dunked on the MIT Media Lab. A weird percentage of the book, 5% of the book, was dedicated to just absolutely trashing the MIT Media Lab building, which is really funny to me because I've been in that building because I have a friend that works there. The building sucks. It doesn't make sense. I remember before reading this book, I went into it and I was just from the outside, I was like, oh, interesting building. And then I go inside and I'm just none of this makes sense. The lobby is big and open and weird and nothing fits in the space that well. They've made a crappy little museum in it. On the individual floors, I got a big sense of the building felt dead. I was there during a normal work day. There were people there, but there really wasn't any spot for people to hang out or be a part of or be in a community with, which is something that I've taken for granted. Most military buildings are very much the good kind of building he talks about, which is modular. You can adapt it to whatever it needs to do. A lot of open space that you can put dividers up in is a thing that the author is a big fan of. For me, that was a really fun personal connection of this building that I thought sucked. Somebody else said it sucked 30 years before I ever went there, which is funny. The last vignette that I really, really liked was him just talking about living in a refurbished boat on land. Not for any particular reason. It was the book equivalent of watching a good Reno show.
I like that last bit too because it felt more relatable. One of the cons I would say of this book is that it's economically on the higher end of things.
It's been out too long for it to be this high price, I think. But maybe I just misunderstand how book economics work. I think it was like 33 when we bought it.
Oh, I didn't mean the price of this book. I just mean that the buildings it's featuring, because it's featuring buildings, these are not like what the average person can aim to build or aim to occupy. I would love to see the small spaces, minimalist apartment version of this kind of book. To me, it's much more relatable to living in a small apartment to be like, I can see how this person has maximized utility of the space.
Have you worked in like an office building?
Yes, I have worked in these kinds of buildings before. And then universities, right? A lot of these like buildings are representative of how universities are structured.
I don't think I had the same hang up you had. Maybe it's just because I do a thing where I like mentally anchor on stuff I find interesting and I like immediately forget stuff that I don't find that interesting.
I thought it was interesting how you mentioned that his wife had a mail order business for horse stuff.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that. I don't know what that made me feel, but it made me feel something. It was a multi-year catalog business. We know where you can buy horse-related things. Just write into our catalog, send us $19.99 and you'll get like the latest horse stuff. It just screams early 2000s commercial to me. You know what I'm talking about? Or Zoo Books, like a blue screen at the end of a commercial. The fact that this lady could have a multi-year thriving catalog-based business feels so foreign. Just like doesn't feel like a thing that exists in a meaningful capacity. Maybe like drop shipping businesses are an equivalent.
The specific part of it being equestrian related, that still exists. I have met someone who specializes in horse stuff, and it's very lucrative because people who can afford horses can afford things.
And they're avid fans. Like Horse Girl is a meme.
Totally believe that this business is a very like attractive business if you are skilled in it. It just like made me laugh because Stewart Brand, he's the creator of the Whole Earth catalog. Here,
Can you
it's a bit
explain what it was?
revealed.
I don't really know.
Like a punk magazine of the time, you know? It's still available on the internet, so you can read it. Steve Jobs and a lot of people are influenced by this whole counterculture magazine. I always thought that Stewart Brand was like a bit more like punk and hippie. Revealed that his wife is an equestrian business of multi-millions. And I was like, oh, of course, that's how you can afford to be a hippie.
The secret trap of hippiedom is many are independently wealthy. What are the lessons learned from why that vignette was in there? They had a space, the business was growing, so the space needed to grow with the business. So they just tore down a wall, right? And then they continued to grow, and then they would move around the desks so that they could just utilize the space more and better. And then I think they shrunk a little bit too. Somebody fact check me in the comments. The point of it is that if they had done a specific build out for where they were at that point in time, the space wouldn't have made as much sense long term because they didn't know what direction and what year by year the business was going to do.
I really love that because as I'm trying to figure out how to build out Reframe Science, the digital building that I can afford is like a Discord, right? What I've seen when I watch friends make Discord, most awkward errors is making too many channels because then that is almost like you're building a giant mansion and there's like 5 people in it and it doesn't really work. Building to fit to your needs and that moment is something that I'm a lot more cognizant of now.
You have notes of all of the components of a building, right? Stewart Brand makes a concerted effort to classify the parts of a building in the parts that change and the parts that are harder to change. Knowing the different parts of it, I think, is like a really useful mental model for when you're thinking about building anything, not just buildings.
Outside in, it's site.
Obviously, you can't change the site. The building is where it is. Structure.
Yeah, building itself.
In siding and stuff like that, which you can break, but it's kind of a pain.
Services.
That's like the AC and the electrical and all that.
Space plan.
The internal dividers, it's like less of a pain to change than the electricity. You can like knock down walls and stuff.
And stuff.
You can move a couch around with like yourself and a buddy.
And apparently furniture is called mobilia in Italian.
I really like that as a model to have in my pocket when I'm thinking about a new thing. Obviously, there's always things that you can change and things that you can't change about things, but having system for figuring out like what maps to what, I found to be really useful for me in figuring out the big buckets and organizing my life.
I think for creators, one of the biggest error is they over anchor on product being a hit. Whereas if your site is yourself and I'm following your journey, then I'm going to stick around to see your next thing.
Structurally, that makes short form video really problematic for creators.
Which is a known thing.
The short form video itself
Oh, the product.
is the bitification of a slice. The short form video isn't about the creator, it's about whatever value they can shove into the 15 seconds that somebody's watching. And so if the value is like a bit where I'm like wearing a funny hat, people connect with the funny hat, not the guy wearing the funny hat. You turn into this pre-Flanderization of people.
For those who don't know, Ned Flanders is a character on The Simpsons. Over the time of this very, very long-running show, he became a more and more exaggerated and flattened version of himself. This is a very common thing that happens with sitcoms. If your sitcom, everything resolves by the end of the episode, that means everyone's reset and nobody grows and everyone becomes a more caricatured version of themselves.
There's one interview with the cast of New Girl where they go into the romance storylines are what get people to watch long term because those are things that are slow burns and happen over time. And it's like a will they, won't they. It's not as satisfying of a payoff if it just like gets resolved by the end of one season, definitely not by one episode. So in order to get viewers to stick with you through that slow burn, you need characters that are like a shorter cycle time story. Usually it's comic relief. So people start watching the show because there's like a funny character that always has a quip, like a Joey Tribbiani in Friends, where like Joey comes in, it's going to be a fun scene, and so people watch it. And then over time, you have this Rachel Chandler, will they, won't they relationship evolution. But you can't get that a lot of the time in the first few episodes of it. So you need that aspect of it to give a more immediate payoff, which is interesting in the context of buildings because the building needs to work on day one, but ideally it also works on like year 5 or year 10. A way to read this book is that it's an argument for building boxes. If you build a box, you're going to be in a pretty good spot to expand that box into whatever it needs to do next. If you don't build a box, it's going to be hard to do the thing that happens in year 3, year 5, year 10.
What shape do you think people are misbuilding?
Now I need to think about this. What do people...
I want to say, like, as someone who has built many non-boxes, I think oftentimes it's more like a box with incomplete sides. Your box going to have a lid on it.
Well, so I was thinking about buildings, not in life. There's like 2 problems. One is the problem that you're talking about where you build a thing that maybe does part of what you want it to, but before you get to the point where it is like a round trip of delivering the value it's promising, you give up or you don't put as much like time and care into the parts of it that people come to expect. But the other problem that I've done a lot, and I think you have, and a lot of people that do stuff on the internet have, is that they want to build the thing that is truly what is in their heads, not like the foundation of what will facilitate what's going to be in their heads a week from now, a month from now, 6 months from now. We kind of call some of it premature optimization when writing software, right? Where you spend too much time figuring out how to make it fast when nobody's visiting the site. One example, I'm working on a poetry project website. One of the things that stopped me from publishing it for a long time was I wanted to have all 100 of the things that I've written in the past year up.
Oh,
live.
yeah, I have the same issue. Yeah, I didn't realize that was the reason why.
Yeah, I got there eventually. A box house is not as good as like a box with a bunch of other boxes attached to it. But once the box is out there, you have the basis to adapt and react and extend it to what naturally comes up as opposed to what you think might come up.
Very similar situation to you. For Reframe Science, I've been wanting to put together like a short little book, right, with the frameworks I'm thinking about, which come from me working with some of the alpha members, advisors of the project.
Yeah.
Where I got stuck, I made it sound like, okay, I'm going to work on this, and then I'm going to launch it at a certain time, and there'll be a field guide, people can buy it. The building and public principle should have been slap it together in Notion, share with people as it's being developed, and then sure, I can make it into a book format later. But that gives me something to share even when it's not finished.
It's the same gap that we have between like our taste and our style when we are making anything. You might have the best taste in the world about like music that's in your head, but if you can't play an instrument, you can't use music production software, what you put out into the world is not going to match the thing that's in your head. Every single creative person ever has had that problem, which is a bummer, but also I think really liberating once you kind of accept the fact that the only way that you close the gap between your taste and style with these kinds of things is by continually putting stuff out there and getting better over time. Dan Harmon, he has this interview where somebody asks him about feeling like a bad writer. The point of the interview is basically him going, some days you just have to prove to yourself that you're a bad writer. You're not a bad writer, you just can't express the thing that you want to express, or maybe you are, but you're gonna gonna be a good writer someday. The way you get to the good writer state where your good writing goes out into the world is by being like, I'm gonna do the thing until I'm not bad at it anymore. And like his mental model is prove to yourself that you're a bad writer by writing the thing. Odds are it's not gonna be that bad, but even if it is, that's still necessary practice.
I love that. I will take that home.
Christin, I think it's time.
Oh, the book rating.
The book rating. The tier rating, the rapture. Imagine I just get raptured on stream.
Did you have any cons about the book? I think we've been very complimentary.
I said what I wanted to say, and my rating will reflect that. I think there are a lot of cons to the book. I don't think this is a book most people will like. I'm not going to give this a C. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I recommended it to you. I wouldn't recommend it to most people in most situations because it's not going to make your life better immediately. You got to get deep into it and kind of reflective and introspective on it to figure out how it applies to you. I don't think it's made with any particular person in mind. I think it is just Stewart Brand being a nerd, talking about something that he's really passionate about. And if you're a nerd and you like really sitting with an idea that might not be valuable to you and going down a rabbit hole, it's going to be a good book for you. But I don't think that's for most people. So it doesn't get a C from it.
I hope people actually like listen to this part. I feel the same way. It's like if you love urban design, you probably have already read this book.
True.
If I want to make analogies from this book, I wouldn't make someone read through this entire book.
Yeah,
I would just tell them what I mean as an
I'd
analogy.
send a cell phone picture of a page I like.
This would be a perfect coffee table book. It does make a good like flip a few pages sort of thing because there's no continuity between the chapters.
Super accurate. It's not a cohesive narrative. It's just a bunch of different things that he's talking about.
In terms of practicality, even lower than the Rick Rubin book. I enjoyed reading it. I was very inspired. And like the building for over time and not trying to make everything happen all at once.
That hits. It hits very much in an age where it's so common to, one, assume overnight successes are actually overnight and they are constant and always happening. This book is the anti-overnight success, which is not the right thing to read for everybody at every point in time. But like having some longitudinal thinking is helpful. Is that a C or a no C from Christin?
It's a no C. In terms of our canon of books,
yes,
that I would like to recommend.
We're going to try something different with the third C in our ranking tier. 3 Cs. Triple C is the highest ranking. If you're someone watching the video, read the book or just comment about our review of the book and let us know if you would give it a C or not. And then we'll tally it up in a few weeks and we'll adjust our tier systems over time.
And if you want to see the latest graphic showing the different books and the tiering, please come to the Discord link.
Yeah, it's in the description of the video for sure. No C's right now. Maybe a C from chat. I doubt it though, but I could be wrong. All right, Christin, what do we read next week?
Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green, one of my favorite people.
I'm surprisingly excited. Oh, we got our first C. The ops are being ops right now. Good. Fight it out. You got to drop it in the comments after the video gets published, though, for it to be counted officially. Everything's Tuberculosis, John Green of the Green Brothers fame. Why should we read this book?
I've always wanted to read this book because here's an example of a person who has taken an extreme obsession and made it into a narrative. It feels like the ideal special interest to book pipeline.
This is an aspirational book for you, is what you're saying.
It is. Normally, I feel quite allergic to pop science books.
Same.
Because a lot of time when I read pop science books where I happen to know that field of science, I'm often cringing and being like, oh, that is technically not even that accurate, but it makes for a good story. Because John Green is so thorough normally, I just have a lot of high hopes for how this book turns out.
Realistically, I don't think I'm going to fact check anything.
Of course not.
Honestly, when you brought it up off camera, I was like, all right, whatever. But then I saw a little clip of John Green on a news show. They were just asking him questions. How is this like tuberculosis? How is this tuberculosis? The 3 quick answers in a row was like, oh, whoa, these things are connected to tuberculosis in like a weird mentalist kind of way. And I was like, okay, maybe everything is tuberculosis. I'm excited for the pop sci rabbit hole, which I also have avoided for the past few years. I was like a big Malcolm Gladwell, Freakonomics, like reader for a while. And then I was just kind of like, oh, the world is a little more complicated than this. And I'm reflexively rebellious. So when a bunch of people started to like it, I was like, oh, I don't like this anymore. But I do think John Green is a good enough author and a good enough storyteller that I think it'll be a fun little jaunt. Maybe I'll learn something about tuberculosis.